We know that, and that taxes, again, are a arbitrary starting point where you don't know where to sit them. So let me just, for the record, say I have tremendous regard as a physicist for Dr. Hansen. I think he's been fantastic. He's done a great job. But I think this is a subject for practitioners and for others. And so we do have an honest intellectual difference.
Can I make a very brief response? Because let's ask the, on the contrary, the sulfur cap and treat was very ineffectual. It achieved a 50% reduction in sulfates because that was what it was designed to do, but additional reductions would have had an economic value 25 times greater than the cost, but it didn't go any further because the cap was the cap.
Why didn't it go any further?
Because the cap was the cap.
No,
50%.
there was no legislation this year. It broke down.
Right, you got to rely on.
But the government failed. The market didn't fail.
That's right. You have to go back and
it went to the EPA and out of the Senate's hands. Right.
Right. So that's why you don't want that approach, where you have to go back and get the government. But let me answer your thing about physicist versus economist. The economists. Let me tell you, the people who actually know about this, and they worked on it 30 years, they are the EPA economists and lawyers. Lori Williams and Alan Zabel are trying very hard to make clear to the American public that that sulfate thing didn't work well. And they're saying exactly what I'm saying, and that's where I get a lot of my information. They are experts in this, and they say what you need is a gradually increasing price, not a cap.
Dr. Hansen, I have to respond because your facts are so wrong, and I'm glad to talk to you afterwards or offline, but they're not accurate. The goal was set from 18 to 9 million tons. Okay, it hit 9 million. It was meant to go, Dr. Hansen, to 4.5 million tons, so it was there. So if you read the legislation, and I invite you to read it, you'll find that Dr. Hansen's words aren't accurate. What failed to happen is Congress and the courts got into a big debate about this, and the legislation was never implemented, so it required an act of Congress. So please be driven by the facts. Please look them up, see what's there, and I think you will find clarity. And while this is a friendly jibing with Dr. Hansen, I do have tremendous regard for him. I think he does physics very, very well. And thank you for your comments, Dr. Hansen.
Okay, now we've got several people who want to come in here. I hope we're going to continue this sort of little bit of banter here. There's a gentleman over here. I think he's next.
Thank you.
No, you've got 2 more minutes for some questions.
Thank you very much. My name is Peter Wong. I'm from Hong Kong. My standing here is the Director of Global Reporting Initiative. Dr. Sandor, I'm going to ask you the question on the first presentation we saw, and that is to do with the graph about the projection of how much coal and how much nuclear there's going to be. Now, I do take note that the presenter comes from one of our august international oil companies, and that is why I'm asking about the nuclear part. I don't think that august company has any investment in nuclear. And this is why I said, Dr. Sandor, what is your opinion of where we should be going as far as nuclear is concerned in terms of our future energy needs?
Well, I think, again, this is not my field of expertise. I'm not an electrical engineer or a nuclear person. I do serve on the board of American Electric Power and did serve on a nuclear committee. I believe in the wedge approach, and there will be, as the gentleman from Shell, come from a lot of different small things. And I do think nuclear is a part of the answer, without a doubt, properly priced.
My problem is relatively small compared to
Well, it's small in America. It's not small in France. It's 80% of the French electricity. It's small in America because of 3 Mile Island, I believe a misconception of the danger of building nuclear and a policy that was against it. I do think that now the costs have gotten so incredible, and the length of time for it to get approved, we're talking 10 years potentially, that it doesn't become a viable short-term answer. But I do believe the gentleman from Shell put it correctly. Look at natural gas, look at other things, and then you'll see that.
Okay, I'm going to do it at this moment because we're into the discussion and we have one more person to address us. So I've got 2 people who I've said yes to just make a comment. The first person, gentleman over here, and then I'm going to ask Jeremy to just come back on this nuclear-related issue, and then I'm going to stop this bit of the discussion so that we can just continue, and then Richard can leave, and we've had our shout with you.
Hi, my name's Robin Howe. I've lived in Asia for 30 years. I'm a fund manager, I'm an economist, I'm an analyst, call it what you want. I would just like to add to what Mr. Sandor has been saying and suggest back to him that markets only work where markets exist. And the problem of what he's describing is that it's very relevant to the first world. What he did in Chicago was to do with existing companies trying to change their use of energy. But where you don't have markets, it's very difficult to implement market disciplines. And the first world is basically 1 billion people, and the third world is basically 6 billion people. And if we're going to see the increase in energy usage of that 6 billion people, it cannot be regulated by a market in the short term because those markets do not exist in the complexity that are needed for the process that Mr. Sandor is talking about. And so one of the big problems that we're going to be facing is how to get finance into the third world so that as they go through this wealth generation process, that finance is focused into what is relevant to each country so that they do not go down the traditional energy usage path that the first world has gone down up until now.
Let me comment, and I don't think we differ by much. If you recall, I used the word plurilateral. And we have a partnership with China National Petroleum Corporation and the city of Tianjin and have established the Tianjin Climate Exchange. My forecast, for good or bad, is Europe is not as far ahead on cap and trade as many people think, and China is not as far behind as many would forecast. So I believe that China will enter into the fold, maybe in 10 years. I do agree it won't be a short run. But the 12th five-year plan calls for a 45% reduction of energy intensity by 2020 by the NDRC. And they're talking about a voluntary market, but voluntary in America is a little different than voluntary in China. The voluntary carries more weight. So I think they'll do it. They'll do it in a way that's Chinese. At even 7.5% growth rate, we're talking about doubling the Chinese economy by 2020. And I would say inside of that, you could see a cap and trade market. It's a forecast, I'll live or die by it, in China by 2020 and maybe as early as 2013 to 2015.
Very good. Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you. Just responding quickly to the question that was raised on nuclear. I do believe that nuclear is an important part of the and. Shell actually, once upon a time, used to be in nuclear. We just didn't do it very well. So it's good that people who do it better than us are involved within that. One of the factors that probably need to take into account in understanding the kind of outlook is that because the industry essentially has not been investing for decades, there's a huge wave of either retirements or refurbishments coming in the next decade before you can even have kind of net growth. And it takes decades to rebuild industrial capacity. So you will see growth in areas where there is growing industrial capacity coming, such as in China, but worldwide growth overall will be constrained by the pace of developing new engineering industry, even developing new nuclear engineers. By 2030, you might have 30% net growth from today, and then nuclear will be competing with technologies such as wind and offshore wind, and with gas, with carbon dioxide capture and storage, and so you begin to get a different competitive field there. So certainly don't ignore it, but that was the background to that. And if I can just take 1 minute, I respect both Professor Hansen and Dr. Sandor, and I think that it would be really good, just in case there's some confusion, to emphasize the agreement between you, which is pricing is important. I'm just a humble practitioner, a humble businessman. Pricing is important, which is very, very significant. And then the nuances as to tax or cap and trade. I happen to believe my economists tend to fall on the side of Dr. Sandor, but that's not the important point. Ambiguity creates inaction. And so I'd rather see action and price than necessarily the perfect mechanism.
Yeah, let me end, because I've got to go on that note, because I think there's something very important that's in the context of what you're talking about. The greatest enemy for the private sector and for the creation of wealth, I believe, is uncertainty and ambiguous environment. In the United States today, we have a frozen government. I don't know what yesterday will bring, and what will it mean in the future. But you essentially have a gridlocked situation. And so I sit on the board of AEP, and we have $2.7 billion a year. We don't know what to spend it on. We can't know if it's gas facilities, transmission. We built a transmission line from Virginia to West Virginia, 90 miles long, okay? It took 16 years, 15 to get regulatory approval, and 1 year to build it. My partners at CNPC built a 3,200-kilometer pipeline from Turkmenistan throughout China, and they did it in 3 years. Okay, so I just tell you that trying to run a business in the United States with the regulatory environment uncertain, we wouldn't care what it is. I'd vote certainty all the time. If you said do nothing or a tax, I think I might even side with Dr. Hansen, okay? I wouldn't if given the choice, because I don't think it's intellectually the better tool. But we need certainty in the United States, and we'll get it regionally, out of California, where most things, good and bad, come from, and more private value is created than any part of America in terms of creativity, the new wave, et cetera. So ultimately, I think that we're all going to be satisfied, and creativity in the public and private sector will drive us to a far better world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.